to talk a little bit and help expand our minds a little bit on some of the ways this might be being used on both a small scale, but then maybe something that might be a little bit longer into the future. And so, Tej, I'll start with you.
I think the simplest place where AI or automation is being used is exhibited on our phones. As you wake up in the morning and you're about to start your drive to wherever your workplace is, you probably have a little icon saying how long your commute's going to be. What's feeding that data is all of those millions of cars on the road. What's feeding that data is your phone recognizing your habit, your calendar, all of those things. So these are tiny problems with tiny solutions that help us do things better. Going back to Kerty's use of the word augmenting. They're augmenting what we would have done in the past by turning on the TV or reading the newspaper for what is likely to face us. This time it is just being delivered. When I see my kids in passing ask Alexa what the temperature is, it's no longer a deterministic action to go look at something to find out the temperature. They just do that in passing. So that's where it's going to begin. But ultimately where it ends is the bigger problems in our hands. The biggest problems are served by the biggest amounts of data. Until we have hundreds and hundreds of terabytes of data, we can't really look at the massive problems of taking a fully autonomous spaceship from Orlando to someplace on Mars. That's a massive problem that is going to be constantly fed by a data stream that we today don't have, we're barely beginning to collect. So those are the two ends of the spectrum of massive data, but they're serving us in our current generation even today.
Kerty?
So what excites me are some of the beta tests going on right now, so what's coming. So for example, something as simple as Salesforce. So salesforce.com, you put your information in. Today we read the sales process go through. But AI is actually being tested to look at every single touch point in that system to then identify and spit out to a salesperson, here is a critical point of the sales process. This is what you need to do right now. So thinking about those kinds of things, and it takes an enormous amount of data to be able to get that right. Other tests going on right now, which I find really interesting, the automated snow clearing on commercial campuses. So you can imagine right now, the snow comes in at 3 a.m. Well, guess what? Calling the person on standby, they might not want to work because it's not a pretty job. Immediately, those things deploy. They leave the garage by themselves. They go around, they pick up the snow, and they've got a camera on them to record anything going on. So you can think about the liability side and everything else that goes along with it. There's a company called Left Hand Robotics that's doing just that, and then they convert those machines into lawn mowing machines in the summer, which is kind of clever, and all of it is a SaaS model. So just thinking through some of these new technologies, obviously Google and Baidu are trying to completely blow the natural language processing and real-time translation out of the water, and from the demos I've seen, I'm pretty blown away. And I could just go down and down the list, but maybe as we get into discussion in certain areas, we can go into more. But those are just some of the ones that really excite me.
I'd say the biggest area I see emerging is around the chatbots and online chat, where companies are talking to us on how do we do this, how do we collect the data. So if you look at an artificial agent, the key is they're going to start with a set of data. They're going to keep learning from sensors, and then they're going to make decisions. And whenever they learn something, they're going to act on it. So unlike humans, if they learn it, they believe it, right? Whereas we learn something and we don't necessarily believe it and take action on it. So like right now, you're probably chatting with organizations, and initially it's an algorithmic artificial intelligence agent, but may not be that smart yet, but it's learning, and it raises its hand and has a human come behind the scenes as soon as it gets a hard question from one of its...
Capturing the patterns and then, finding the underlying trends from the data. That's something AI can really do well at this moment. So in medical area, people are, a lot of people are working on developing algorithms based on AI to recognize the location of the tumor, contour of the internal organs and stuff like that. And then that kind of information is fed into the, medical team, where they plan the surgery and the treatment based off of, what computer has came up with. And then the speed of, such kind of a process is much faster than what human workers can do. So they can actually accelerate the medical, treatment process pretty well. Another example is that I work with the University of Iowa Athletics Department, and then what they're doing is what they started to do is to collect a large amount of data about their athletes, and then based on the data they collected, we started to predict injuries, we started to predict the performance of the players and stuff like that. So when you're given a large number of data, what AI algorithms can do right now is to recognize something and then catch the trends and capture the patterns and underlying beneath it. For the long term, I think we're moving toward making our AI algorithms to be able to make decisions. Decision-making process is not just a cognitive process. It involves the cognition, but there is something beyond that, obviously. So toward that direction, still AI algorithms' ability to make decision on its own is pretty limited yet. So I guess that's the one direction that the research is progressing right now. And the issues with how the AI algorithm will collaborate with the human, that's one of the important things that that are often overlooked when we discuss about AI. If AI algorithms start to have a decision-making ability, then how do we incorporate that decision with our human decisions? Because humans are good at filling the gaps, relying on their experience, and they can comprehensively take a look into a problem. Versus AI algorithms are pretty much narrowly focused on the data set that they're given. So how to compromise that two different components in the decision-making process is one of the long-term direction that the AI algorithm is going. And then another thing is the reliability and uncertainty. Of course, AI algorithms are based on the large amount of training data set, but there are always uncertainties and reliability issues. So let's say your autonomous vehicle can drive in California where the weather is always nice and shiny, but can you drive in Iowa weather when there's 6 inch, 7 inches of snow and lanes are not visible and stuff like that? So that's another actually the direction that we should really look into for the long-term development of AI.
Donna?
Okay, on AI on the kind of immediate side, we see more that it can be used in what's going to be a predictive nature, use that for modeling, something that's constantly going to occur, whether it's in the occupation in the industry. And a big deal in Iowa has been with manufacturing, because we had a high of manufacturing probably in the late 90s of over 250,000. Went down to about 198,000 during the recession, and we're back at 212. It's never going to be back to where it was. It's never going to be at that level. We've had a lot of artificial intelligence involved. We had a lot of overseas manufacturing that went other areas because they have been more progressive in some of the AI than we have been. So those things in that industry are not going to come back. What we also are seeing that we're using AI more, and because we do statistical work and modeling, so we're using it, trying to use it more as predictive measure of what's going to happen in the future. Because one of the things that's very hard to predict, even though I think our analysts and I did pretty well, is things like a recession. You don't know when it's going to hit, you don't know how deep it's going to be, and there's always a lot of talk and scurry about that. But we're using modeling through statistics and mathematicals to predict what would happen, and then the federal government is helping us with that by upgrading their machine, their software, the models, talking to experts, doing a comparison of what happened, what we predict to happen. So particularly we're using it a lot with our local area unemployment statistics, which is like the labor force, unemployment rate, how many people are employed, unemployed. That's big predictor that is indicator. It's always a lagging indicator, just a month behind, but we're using that a lot in there, as well as in our current employment statistics, which provides us information on the employment industries each month. So those monthly indicators, which are really highly sought, we're using AI to look at what has happened and capture that, and then help us predict what's going to come on in the future, and then help us also to identify those outliers.